Dude, we're in for a treat today. Talking about getting outdoors, being together, being in nature, leadership, like Knight Campbell, legit. And he's a Navy helicopter pilot, so that's kind of cool too.
Yeah, I think the only thing that could have been better is if he was class of 2002. That's
Fair.
about it.
Yeah,
Because
fair.
dude is a ninja. I love how he, through coaching, came to the realization that he could combine his passions for leadership and his passion for outdoor adventure, combine those into a business that makes leaders better. Gets them outside, gets them creative. He has the data to back it up. Super smart dude. A lot of research goes into it, and just love this interview with Knight Campbell.
For sure. So if you're a leader, which pretty much everyone listening to this is, you got to listen to this episode. Do it.
Do it now.
You're listening to Filling the Storehouse podcast. I'm David.
And I'm Stuart. And we want to walk with you on the journey to living the abundant life through faith, family, and freedom. Our goal is to refine our why while helping you find yours. Together, achieve our best and highest purpose. In the end, we'll drive each other to intentionally fill our storehouse.
All right. So I know this is going to be a really good conversation because one, we have a Naval Academy grad, and two, we have a helicopter pilot. So this is going to be good.
And for everybody who's like literally about to click off, please don't. It's going to be a great episode. We're talking leadership. We're talking business. We're talking getting outside. So if you were turned off by the helicopter pilot thing, hey, just stick around.
What's your joke? What's your joke that you always say, David? That you try to like make fun of me?
Well, you
about?
already did it, man. You just say, how do you know if somebody is a naval aviator?
How?
They'll tell you. That's how. You know.
Knight, it's great to have you, man. Thanks for coming on the Filling the Storehouse podcast with us. I know this is going to be a fun conversation. I know David had a good phone call with you. I'm just kind of learning about what you do. And we're super pumped about kind of hearing more about that. If you could, just for our audience, give us a little background about who you are, where you come from, and what you're doing.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the invitation. Stoked to be here. Can't have a better introduction than Naval Academy grad helicopter pilot.
Right.
I mean,
right.
That's amazing. No, I just quick intro, went to the academy, got to fly helicopters, spent about 10 years active duty in the Navy, left the Naval Academy, went across OS blank, blank, blank bridge there and said, I will never go back there. And my wife was a Marine, and,
Nice.
4 or 5 years or whatever the time was, we looked at that as a place where we could go co-locate, and we went back, and it was the best move. Just loved teaching leadership, being back in that space, not as a midshipman. I always tell the stories. Midshipmen, myself included, are a little bit self-entitled people, and they would come into my office.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, right. They'd come into my office and be like, "Oh, sir, why'd you come back to the Naval Academy?" This pregnant pause of, "Well, you're the best and the brightest, and I wanted to come work with you." And I'd be like, "Well, my wife works in that building right over there, and it's nice to be close to her. What do you need?"
Nice.
Their faces would be like, "Oh."
Right.
So yeah, you got to be able to laugh at yourself a little bit. People are always like, "Oh, the Naval Academy produced the best naval officers." I'm like, "Well, for like a month, and then
right.
the same, and we're all doing the same job, and it doesn't really matter." So
for sure.
Yeah, but then my wife was going to med school. She was a Marine for 10 years and wanted to go into medicine, and we're looking at kids, and made sense to get out of the Navy. Went reserves for a while and trying to figure out what the heck to do. Stumbled through a PhD program, did 6 months there, figured that wasn't quite the path for me, because I wanted to be more hands-on. I wanted to use the research, not create it, at least at that point in my life. And I had a leadership coach at the time through my time at the Naval Academy, and we were just having coffee, and I was telling her how I didn't want to be in DC for such a long time, how I wanted to be outside more. I knew that's what mattered. And she said, "Well, Knight, why don't you just take leaders outside and work on leadership there?" And it's those little conversations that point you in the right direction that can change your life. You just never know. It was just coffee with Sharon. But from there, started working for National Outdoor Leadership School, started guiding for REI, I got my executive coaching certificate at Georgetown, and kind of put all of those experiences together along with my time in the Navy and a couple of master's degrees, and started figuring out how to create the best possible container for corporate and business leaders to become better leaders, better people, which is really what resonates with me about what you all are doing for men to become better husbands, fathers, leaders, people. That's what it's all about. That's good stuff.
Yeah, man, I love that. And, you know, you get a couple things. So one, when you're willing to do things like have a coach and get out there, I mean, dude, 2 words can change your life, right? Because they just see a different perspective. And when you have that growth mindset, like you obviously do, putting yourself in a situation with a coach or surrounded by other people that feed into that can literally change the trajectory of your life, which we didn't talk about that. And I just absolutely love how that was kind of the sequence. And I also want to encourage folks, you know, as you were talking, I was thinking about how you and I connected. And really it was I had talked to some other people, met them via LinkedIn, and they were within this very, you know, it's a very big network, but you'd think it'd be small, the Naval Academy network, right? And she's a coach, and she said, you have to talk to Knight. And I'm like, I don't know who Knight is. And she made a connection. We talked, and there's just all these similarities, but it really boiled down to leveraging these different networks and trying to be value add in those networks. And you can connect with people that just, you know, so like-minded. And you and I talked, I'm like, dude, you got to come on the podcast because, you know, we love being outside. We love leadership. We love action. And so I find it to be, you know, just as a little plug for things like LinkedIn and just reaching out to people. You never know what happens. It could absolutely change your life. And if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about, you know, the Cairn Leadership Strategies and just what that evolved into.
Yeah, well, first I got to put a plug in for LinkedIn, because I'll tell you, I shamelessly connect with people. It's kind of our marketing platform, and people will reach out and say, hey, do you know so-and-so? I'm looking for a job. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. I just, you know, send a connection to that person. And we have about 45 people in our guide community. Some of them are beginning, some of them guide for us. I'd say 70% of those people I met on LinkedIn, and they are good
awesome.
friends and solid individuals. They drive our company. They are the value proposition. Like, they are experienced business leaders, experienced military leaders coming in because they love the outdoors and spending time with leaders outside. And, you know, I'm blessed to have met them. And it seems silly. It's kind of like online dating, you know, it's like, well, how did you all meet? And then people expect some crazy cool story of meeting in the middle of the wilderness. It's like, no, I just reached out to that guy on LinkedIn, or, you know, like Jude just saw that we did this and he was like, that sounds cool. I got to talk to this guy.
Yeah.
So
well, it's funny because I read something the other day that said, you know, people find their wives online and their husbands online now. So why not find potential amazing business partners? Like it's just where we're at. And if you do it the right way, which I believe, which you do, like this morning, I read that post that you talked about culture. And I was just like, I read it probably 4 times because I'm like, man, you used a lot of big words in there and a lot of leadership, you know, heuristics and, you know, different, you know, theories and strategies, but the value add proposition, if you're willing to put yourself out there and try to build others up and give value, then it's a great place, right? You can make, you know, I consider myself blessed to have been connected to you for a person I never spoke to before. And it just was a commonality of the Naval Academy, but then leadership immediately became part of that conversation. And so I connected with you and 2 other dudes that are awesome guys as well. And so, yeah, this isn't a LinkedIn conversation, but I just want to encourage people to, because I hate social media, dude. Like I'm still on the fence.
I was about to say, man, you're plugging social media pretty hard right now. You're normally poo-pooing all over it.
I'm still considering getting off of Facebook. I'm not gonna lie, but I have found LinkedIn because it's more what I'm looking for. I have found LinkedIn to be very fulfilling, not because of my posts or anything like that, but because of the conversations that are generated and the people that I've met through it have been pretty awesome. So anyways, Cairn's leadership, man, tell us about it.
Yeah. Just a disclaimer. That post was written for helicopter pilots, so that's why the words were so big.
Ah,
Yeah, Stu doesn't. Stu actually asked me to translate it for him. So
right.
Anyway, yeah, Cairn Leadership. We are fusing outdoor adventure with rigorous leadership study to help people become better leaders. And being out in nature brings a lot of benefits just on a personal level in terms of fitness and health. But it also creates this really powerful container where you can practice, you can learn, you can think a little bit differently, get out of your normal thought processes, the normal rut or routines that you have with your team. So we're taking people outside and we're talking about the same stuff. Like I've done classes at HBS, at Cornell. They're great. We're talking about the same stuff while we're climbing mountains, and it's just a lot more fun, and it sticks with you, I think, a lot better.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome, man. So, I'm curious, like, on your, I took a look at your website and you're talking about, talent retention, and you're talking about team cohesion and leadership development. And how do you, climb a mountain and teach these business leaders how to retain talent? How do you teach them to come together as a group while climbing mountains?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we're not teaching, I wouldn't say we're teaching how to retain talent as much as there's some great research out there, the battalion commander effect. I think it's Colonel Everett Spain did the research where if someone, a junior officer in this case, the Army, which is strange, but probably also the Navy, has a battalion commander, so 2 levels above him or her, who they look up to and respect, they're very likely to stay in the military because they see that person, they want to become that person. They know that as they grow in that organization, they're going to be around that type of person. And if they don't have someone that they respect as a leader, they leave. And so you see that in the military a lot. We're draining talent because we're not focusing on leadership enough for the 05, 06 level of leadership. And so the same thing happens in companies. If people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses. And so when we first started this, we thought, well, we offer this really cool opportunity for people to work on their leadership. They get to go outside. It would really resonate with the right type of people, and they will want to stay with the company because the company invested in them. And that's not really true. We help develop great leaders who are selfless, self-aware, can communicate better, make better decisions, have more emotional intelligence, all the things that we talk about. And that allows them to keep the people who are under them. So that's where the talent retention is. Like, yes, there's investment in leadership, but it's by investing in leadership, by making your leaders better in your organization, that people stick around. So that's the talent retention. And how do you do it on a mountain? Oh my gosh, that'll take like a couple hours to unpack. But just think about, trust. If you're on a rope team, we just did Mount Baker a couple months ago up in Washington State. You have people on a rope team. When you're traveling on glaciers, you have to be at a certain pace, right? So if you're too close to each other, there's too much slack in the rope. If someone does fall into a crevasse, you have a lot of force in the system. You're going to pull people off the mountain. So you have to be at just the right place. You're basically flying in formation, just a little bit slower than we do.
Right.
So you get that experience somatically. And if you're talking about high performing teams, about having, distributing consciousness across the team, distributing knowledge across the team, having collective skills. So each person is good at a different thing. When you're talking about that around the campfire, around dinner, people can reach back to that experience from the morning and say, oh, that's kind of like when I got too close to this person and we had to kind of spread back out. Or that's like how often on the mountains, a common lesson, we go very slow. And people who are fit are like, oh my gosh, like, are we really going to go this slow all day? And by the end, they're like, thank you so much for going so slow, because I didn't know it was going to take 12 hours.
Right.
And if I had gone my normal pace, I would have burned out. I call it the power plod. But what a great business lesson. So if you're talking about like mission, vision, and values and strategic decisions, Like maybe that's something you need to build in, like do the power plot, slow it down a little bit so that people can actually sustainably do it. So I could go on and on. I love climbing mountains with leaders, but you give meat to it. You give something for people to hold and turn over and talk about around the campfire, and putting people in that kind of, this is a little bit dangerous. I'm pretty uncomfortable. Our guides are really good at just putting you in that I'm a little bit uncomfortable zone. Makes us think differently. It attaches emotions to the lessons we're learning. So if I talk about that power plot and strategic decision making, people remember that for years and years and years, because they're like, oh yeah, it's like that time on Mount Baker. There's a story behind it. There are emotions behind it.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome, because you can only gain so much appreciation or even experience or that glue that makes you bring something back from PowerPoints, right? And even if they're really, really well done PowerPoints and maybe a very engaging speaker. I mean, it's just a different level. And so I love how you've turned that, you've taken those principles, those passions, leadership and outdoors, and turned that into a business. And one thing you said, and I got to read this battalion commander effect, but we're in the midst of this, this period where they call the great resignation, right? All these people are leaving, and that and some other books that we've talked about in the past with, some Simon Sinek, The Infinite Game, and some of these different concepts. And you're seeing people leave because of a huge lack of leadership, and leadership, being very bottom line driven, and quote unquote leaders are thinking that the premise of the business is to make the shareholders happy, right? And I think it's an interesting thing. So have you had any just like breakthrough aha, like CEOs just like, wow, I have not been doing this right? Those moments, are they pretty commonplace? Are you seeing significant immediate changes? And then do you guys have like a follow-up mechanism?
Yeah. So one thing that's interesting, every time we take a group out, and we do open enrollment, and then we do kind of custom adventures where teams sign up and we create everything customized for the team. Open enrollment, we just get really cool people because it's outdoors. They're the type of people who probably aren't driving their business into the ground on purpose because of shareholders. And I'd also say that it's really hard to prioritize. It's easy for us to say here on this podcast, well, you should prioritize your people and put them first. But then when your cash flow drops to zero and you can't pay your people if you don't drive the business line, all that has to fall away because you're trying to make the business work so that you can pay your people in the future. Or, when you have 10,000 emails, our brains are just not wired to say, okay, the priority is to have a good conversation with David today, and I'm going to come check these emails later. Like, we get dopamine hits from checking the emails. So even good people, good leaders are still going to mess it up. And I think a lot of times we're always asking, what did you learn? What are you taking away? And at first people will say, well, I haven't learned anything. But especially for the executives, I've remembered a lot. I remember what it's like to be in my people's shoes. I remember maybe how to reprioritize, why it's important for me to talk to my people more or invest my time and energy in my people. I remember how my leaders thought they were just crystal clear when they communicated things to me, and I had no freaking clue what they were trying to tell me I needed to do. So it kind of puts them back in their people's shoes, and it reteaches lessons, which I think, it's not sexy to be like, you're going to relearn how to communicate. And I've been on 47 of these adventures now, and I learn every single time. And it's a little bit like reading the Bible, where it tells you what you need to know at that time. So you can go out and talk about the same thing, different people, different day, and take away a different lesson, different kind of understanding of where you are as a leader. And I think that's, once you come to grips with that you're going to have to grapple with this your whole life, your whole career. It's exciting because just like you mentioned that culture post, I'm over here thinking, whoa, if culture is a habit, like maybe we can use all the other science that's out there for habits to start changing cultures. That's cool. And I have been studying and thinking about culture for 10 plus years, haven't had that thought yet. So it can be pretty exciting.
Yeah, dude, that's super
I love
cool,
that,
man.
man.
Yeah, I feel like, so David and I, we started the Storehouse Mastermind, and it's a group of men getting together, and similar thing, man. Like, I feel like, coming from the Naval Academy and being 20 years in the military, and, I feel like we've had so many lessons on leadership and habits and culture and all this kind of stuff. But every single time we're running one of these meetings, like there's something that's said, like there's some light bulb aha moment that's never been said before or never thought about the same way. And it just impacts you. And it makes you better. Like every single day, it's making you better when you're like being intentional about this stuff. So, like when you're running these adventures, is your avatar the execs, the executive team, and that's who you're taking out there? Or, are you taking entire companies out? And second question to that, like, where are you going and what are you doing on these adventures?
Yeah, you all are double tapping me on these questions. I'm trying to knock them down as they come.
Got it. You're doing great.
Man, I wish we had an avatar. Honestly, like everybody asked that. It's like, well, a typical trip, like one of my favorite trips, we had a couple business owners, we had a couple mid-level managers, and we had a 21-year-old plumber. And the 21-year-old plumber brought as much or more to the conversations as anyone else. There's just this really broad perspective across the group. They range from 21 to 65. And the 21-year-old obviously has a lot to learn from a 65-year-old, but a 65-year-old has a lot to learn from a 21-year-old too. But, that beauty of diversity of perspective makes it real hard for us to say, well, we're looking for like 40 to 45-year-old executives in the industry of whatever. I would say across the board, we're looking for people who are innovative, who are tired of the status quo. Like I did a lot of research on transfer of training when I was in my PhD program, and the numbers are dismal. It's about 10% of training transfers, especially in a more complex kind of thing like leadership. If you're training people how to do something where there's steps and it's the same every time, it's a little bit different. But if you're trying to train how to be a decisive person or how to have more emotional intelligence, it's around 10% across the board. Wow. And we throw billions of dollars at that a year across the country in leadership development. So yeah, how do you get that a little bit better? Well, it's the people who want to. Like that's our whole mission, is to make it more than 10%, at least 50%. And to go back to your question, David, what's the follow-up? We try to get people to become members because we do coaching on a monthly basis after the adventure for up to 6 months. And that coaching, and we already talked about the power of coaching. It's just having someone listen and ask powerful questions and help co-create those solutions and hold you accountable. Like, I'm going to be accountable to my wife right now. I'm going to tell you all what I said yesterday. We had our first hurricane crux adventure here in Shenandoah, Virginia. It wasn't so bad, honestly, but I was apprehensive going into it. And I said, we talked about energy management. We talked about communication. And I said, if energy is a resource, I want to start intentionally investing energy, because we think of time, like I want to invest time with my family. I want to invest energy in the relationships that matter. And one of the ones that matter most to me is my wife. So there you go. Now I have to do it because I said it here.
Nice.
But that's how it goes. You make those commitments, and then you have a coach who says, hey, Knight, you said that you're going to invest energy in relationships that matter to you. What does that look like over the last month? To answer, what do these trips look like? We are all over the board, all over the country. That's what I love about it. We're talking to someone in Denver now, and we're like, well, maybe we could do a hut trip. That would be really cool. So our operations guy is working on that and figuring that out. I'm stoked on that. But we do from canoe trips here in Virginia and Nevada on the Colorado River, to climbing 10,000 foot mountains on glaciers, to 14ers and climbing Mount Shasta, to everything in between, rock climbing, multi-pitch rock climbing. It's all of it, which is awesome. It's super fun. And, when I get a guide who's like a business leader, been around for a long time and has good stuff to say, and says, hey, I used to be a raft guide. We'll do whitewater trips too. The sky's the limit.
Super cool, man.
Dude, that is, I love that. And, you know, I think it's just so powerful. A couple of things you said. One, I love your business model, and it sounds amazing to me. Just fun, right? It just sounds like a lot of fun, and the variety of it, and the willingness to just go meet people where they're at and go adventure is rad. But the accountability piece, man, you know, I feel like there's very few things as powerful as accountability. And when you start putting things out there and saying this is important to me, and you tell somebody that, and they're like, okay, cool. You know, I mean, they have no skin in the game from outside of the fact that you said it was a priority to you, and they're going to hold you to it. It is so powerful. And Stu and I were reflecting right before the call on the power of even holding each other accountable to get our wives some flowers, right? And that seems so basic, but what that in both of our households, it resulted in different things in the relationship, but the consistent thing was, one, we held each other accountable to it, and there were tangible benefits. We didn't do it for the benefits. I was actually surprised by you know what happened, but it drove the relationship to a different place, drove the conversation to a different place. And dude, it wouldn't have happened without accountability, to be quite honest. I would have found another reason why not to do it. And so I love how you highlight that. And then the coaching after the fact, the accountability, I think is I imagine it's probably like jet fuel for you guys, and just making that stuff stick, man. It's super cool. So what do you envision for the business? What's you know, you look at night, you know, 3, 5, 10 years down the road, what do you see for the business?
Yeah. Oh, well, I got to hit on the accountability piece because it's interesting. There's research out there that says you don't even need an accountability partner. Like, you don't necessarily need Stu to call you. In fact, he probably didn't. He probably did it before he called you. When we make goals and we tell other human beings that I'm going to do this, we tend to do it. It's like 80 or 90% success rate in terms of doing the things that we say we'll do. If we write them down, we're like 40%. If we just think them in our head, we're like 20%. So yeah, when you have someone who's going to call you, that's even better. But just telling people like, hey, I'm going to get my wife flowers, pretty powerful. And then I got to share, we've been talking about time and energy management a lot. This idea, I can't remember his last name. He's on the Art of Manliness podcast. He was a minister, burning out, and talking about how he got out of that burnout. And he started saying, instead of, oh, I just don't have time to do that, he would say, I just didn't make that a priority. And it sounds like it's a gut punch, you know, like if you didn't get your wife flowers and you're like, yeah, I just didn't make that a priority. It doesn't sound great, but it's true. You know,
Yeah.
if you didn't make it a priority. So I think
we talked about that a little bit with our kids, right? Like if your kid asks you to go like throw the football and you say, no, I can't right now. You know, I got to send this email. I got to do some work. Well, no, it's not the time that's the issue. It's just, if you start saying, no, son, you're not my priority right now to go throw the football. My priority is to write this email. That changes the dynamic like quite a bit, right? Like, I don't want to tell my son that he's not my priority to go throw the football.
Well, and that's what you're saying with your actions,
totally,
whether or not you say it with your words. So
right.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
Where we're going to be in 10 years, all over the country. Likely we're moving more and more to B2B. So we're hyper focused on culture and how do you build it to be stronger. There's some cool research from Edgar Schein. He's a premier culture researcher. And he talks about making strong cultures. To make a strong culture, you have to have a lot of challenge. So if a company, a startup, goes through a lot of challenge, they might go out of business, they have cash flow, all these different things, they're going to have a strong culture. Doesn't mean it's a good culture, just strong. Like it could be a really strong bad culture. But if you don't have challenge, then you won't have a strong culture. And you can imagine like some of these unicorn companies that didn't, got tons of funding and had all the ping pong, like WeWork maybe is a good example. Like they didn't have as many challenges because it was a great idea. And then when they had challenge, they had to get real and make a culture at that point. So yeah, I think working with more businesses, working with executive teams, we're talking to companies about doing retreats, thinking more strategically, just getting on the same page. A lot of new businesses don't know each other. A lot of teams we take out have never met in person. They've worked for 2+ years and it's been Zoom all the way. And so getting crystal clear on who the people are that you're working with and what their values are is just a huge driver for success. In terms of where we are as a business, we've got a lot of amazing guides. I think we'll have some who are full-time right now. Because we want business leaders, we have a lot of part-time guides, which is awesome because they come from their job at whatever company and they're talking about energy management and they're like, yeah, I struggled with that on Monday when I had all these emails and here's kind of what I did. So I think just working on how to scale is our biggest challenge because we only take 8 to 10 people out at a time. It's hard. I can't remember more than 10 names, to be honest with you. So no, it's not totally true, but you don't get the same dynamic. If you have companies often are like, well, can we take 30 people out? I'm like, just imagining 30 people milling around Joshua Tree, 5 people climbing and the rest of them doing goodness knows what. So we break them up into 3 groups of 10 and it's fantastic. But yeah, that scaling is our next challenge and figuring out how to make it scale in terms of price and getting all the guides. And yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
No, it does. It's awesome. And also where your mind goes. And I love it because you clearly have a culture that you want to establish. You clearly have core values and those are driving decisions, right? So I think a lot of people without the time spent doing that, they just want to maximize numbers, right? So that the more numbers I get, the more income we have and the better it is for the business and the bottom line. And that's none of that is inherently bad. But I think when you have a very clear vision, Stu and I were going through the same thing. We started with the mastermind. We're like, hey man, let's just make every house is 30 people. And they were like, man, the conversations we're having are so intense and they're so like vulnerable. Like, and we have an hour to run through it and then, go to the in-person stuff at a different time, but that's less frequent. And you're like, dude, I don't think this honors the men in the group to have 30 people. Like, I think the max is going to be 15. Like it just is what it is. But I think what's cool is, does that hurt a bottom line, quote unquote? Well, I guess, but if your bottom line is money-based, then yes. If your bottom line is value-based, then it's a huge benefit, right? And I think you have to have those core values and you have to put in the thought, which I know, dude, you put in years of thought into this. And I also love how you said every single meeting is different because you have a growth mindset. So your ears are open to growth and different perspective. And that just builds on itself, which I think is just an amazing place for you guys to be. It's incredible. And so I look forward to, Stu and I will be some part-time guides at some point down the line.
Nice.
And,
That's good.
I don't know.
You're the first people that said that. It's strange. No,
it's interesting, man.
Nice.
I do see the challenge for businesses. I mean, ours included of this virtual world that we live in. Everything's on Zoom these days, and there's just not the connection that we need as human beings when we're just on Zoom all the time. And it's it's something that I think your company specifically is an answer for that, right? To get people out of their little, basement home offices that they work on Zoom all day long and actually get out and hug the people that you work with and high five of them. And like, there's something that we saw. So, we're on our Storehouse Mastermind. We meet on Zoom. We have people all over the world, really. But we did our first retreat in person in Breckenridge, Colorado. There's 13 of us. And those 2.5 days of human connection and touching and feeling and hugging and high-fiving and being in the same house, sleeping next to each other in bedrooms, walking together, climbing up mountains, jumping in lakes. Like, there was so much connection and that feeling of fellowship in just those 2.5 days that just blew up just the feeling of connection for future Zoom meetings, right? Now these guys feel so much closer and connected because of those 2.5 days in person. And so like
Absolutely.
we're talking, you know, like how do we same problem, right? Like how do we scale that? Like how do we make that a thing in our mastermind? You know, because like, do we want to be out every like once a month doing these retreats? Maybe.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
I mean, do you want? Maybe
does my wife want me to be out every month? Maybe not.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, it's powerful, man, when you actually get into person and you're connecting with these people, and that's a challenge for companies these days. It's an interesting dynamic that we've kind of gone through. I think a lot of it was because of COVID, but you know, we're coming in this digital world that we're all living in now. It's interesting.
We see it. You know, we took a group of general managers out for a big company last April, and just the feedback we continue to get is they are closer, they know each other better, they help each other out more. So it's not just like, I'm sure you all are seeing this too. It's not, we did a weekend in Colorado in the mountains and it was really cool. We high-fived and we're back to normal. When you get on Zoom, you're like, Stu, like, how are you? How are your kids? Like, what's going on in your life? Because you have a connection. Yeah. And so you can really make that Zoom meeting better. And I got to share this because I heard it over the weekend. Don't know if this is true or found it in research, but apparently research shows that on Zoom, you're basically like, the way we're situated, we're so close that the only situation you'd be that close to another human being in real life would be if you're going to fight or screw. So the whole time you're looking at the other person, like, which one is it? You know, your mind in the back of your mind is going crazy. And so you're in your Zoom meeting, but you're just using all this energy trying to figure out what the heck is going on and why am I like close enough to see Knight's nose hairs right now. It's pretty funny. I don't know if that's true.
That's super interesting. Yeah. Huh.
That is well, you know, and Knight, would you say that one of the biggest, from the feedback you guys get, one of the biggest takeaways is just being together? Yeah.
I think being together and being in nature. So like one person this weekend came out and she's like, I've been thinking and grappling with where do I want to go? Like, I've got a good business. I feel stagnant though. I'm not sure what to do. I've been really working through this for 6 months. And just that, like a moment that stands out to me over the weekend, we're sitting under the tarp. It rained all weekend. You know, Hurricane Ian over here on the East Coast. We're sitting under the tarp and she was like, you know, like we've been talking, having all these great discussions. I've been connecting with people. We went for this long hike in the rain. And then like half an hour ago, I just went and stood by the creek and I was sitting there and it was like, boom, I know what to do. I know where I need to go. And that's big, you know, to have that breakthrough. And it happens to me all the time, trail running, on these trips that we do. We spend so much time ruminating, trying to sort out cognitively with our prefrontal cortex, like figure out the problems, do our pros and cons lists. We ignore our bodies, we ignore our emotional brain, and you get outside and it just unlocks it in this magical way. And then you're like, oh yeah, like take leaders outside and teach leadership. Obviously, thanks Sharon, or whatever it is.
Dude, that's so fascinating too, because it's so simple and a lot of times it's free. Obviously not the, you know, when you go getting coaching or you go with the group on an adventure, but just to step outside, take a breath, get away from the computer, and to even more powerful to do that with somebody else. You know, I mean, sometimes I think there's solitude and there's all that greatness, but to go out and just have, excuse me, you're both in that mindset and have a conversation, right? Like Stu and I are going to we're already planning on a mountain bike ride on Thursday. And I'm already excited about it. My wife, before I left the house, I said, hey, you want to go on a mountain bike ride when I get home? And she's like, yeah, sounds great. And I'm super pumped about, you know, doing that with her, but also just like the idea of being outside, like it just is so different. This is 2 weeks in a row, we're having outdoor adventure type people on the podcast, but I think we're so quick to discount it, man, because we're so busy. I don't have time. I can't check email. I don't have a signal. That's a blessing. Not having a signal is a blessing. And to be able to do that intentionally, I'm glad you highlighted that. You highlighted the fact that that's where some of the biggest breakthroughs actually happen.
Yeah. Well, I think a couple of things. We think it's an accident. It just happened to happen outside. And that is not true. Like science shows us why it happens outside. Extended Mind by Annie Murphy Paul is a fantastic book. It's basically like a long advertisement for what we do, because she talks about why you should be outside more, why you should be in a relationship with people, why you should do your most important thinking while you're moving your body, all these different things that we just already do. So I'm like, thanks for the advertisement. But yeah, it's proven that we think differently outside. It's proven that studies coming out of the University of Utah show that we're 50% more creative after time outside. Like on validated creativity assessments. It's not just Knight going out and being like, well, I felt like I was, a lot more creative. It's validated studies that are showing this. And so I think leaders and people think it's an accident. So we're like, well, like the safe bet is to sit by my computer and try to figure out this problem on an Excel spreadsheet, which I've been trying to do for 6 months and haven't figured out. And I also think there's a guilt aspect because it's fun, like you're trying to solve a hard business problem or create a better relationship with someone or give hard feedback. Like we do that all the time internally at Cairn Leadership while we're rock climbing. And if people don't understand that, if the people in the organization don't understand that, all they see is, oh, Knight goes rock climbing a lot and then comes back with a lot of ideas that I have to execute. Or, Knight, I went to his office and he wasn't there because he was trail running. And that guy's just always out having fun. And so I think good leaders, rightfully so, feel guilty and think like, oh, I'm not there for my people. I'm out having a fun mountain bike ride. And we have to shift that mindset to both, hey, if I'm not having a mountain bike ride, it's because I'm figuring out how to make this organization thrive in 10 years, because that's where I do my strategic thinking. And I expect you to do the same thing. I think it's funny. A lot of leaders will say, well, I wish I could do more stuff outside. It's just not possible. People in my organization aren't fit, or we're in downtown San Diego. There's just not enough outside. I'm like, you're in downtown San Diego. Yeah, I guarantee you within 2 blocks of your office, there's a park, there's a place to walk, there's a waterfront. Take your executive team, grab lunch from your favorite, bagel shop or whatever it is, walk over to that park and talk about something important. And I guarantee you'll have more breakthroughs and people walk away refreshed. They'll have the vitamin D, they'll be healthier, they'll be more creative. Like studies are showing this. It's not just Cairn Leadership saying it is true. It's science and research backing it up, which is really cool.
Dude, when you started talking about that, and immediately I started thinking about, us wanting to be better dads, us wanting to be better husbands. Those same lessons apply, there's often times where I feel a little bit guilty for taking a Thursday and going on a mountain bike ride. Right. And if I can communicate that in a way, to my spouse or to my kids that, hey, I'm trying to make myself better, but I'm also trying to make our family better. I'm trying to become a better dad and husband by going and doing these things outside, by going and putting myself out there and having the space to think. I think that's a game changer. And I'm also thinking about,
well, by the way, I want you guys to do it for yourselves.
Right. And
I want this to be part of your life because I want you to be more fulfilled and happy.
Right. And that's where I was going next, is like, how do we, as wanting to be better dads and husbands and leaders and community builders and friends, how do we transcribe that to the next generation? How do we, in this digital world where, our kids have cell phones with all the apps and internets and world wide webs when they're 10, or whatever age that they get these phones, how do we get them off of the phones and we get them outside and we take all this stuff away and transcribe these lessons to our children? It's where my head goes right now, man. It's awesome stuff, but it's challenging, right? It's challenging in this world that we're living in.
Challenging. I'm laughing. One of the first people we took out, she's a business owner, very successful in San Diego. And we were doing Joshua Tree rock climbing. We got like half a mile down the trail and she's like, there's cell service out here, right? And we're like, oh, no, there is not. She was really apprehensive. She'd never been disconnected from her team. She wasn't positive that they would thrive without her direction. She was really worried about it. Wow. And then, I'm like, oh geez, like it was literally our first trip with clients, and I was like, she's going to hate the trip. I had all this inner turmoil. And Sunday we got back to the parking lot. I'm like, hey, are you excited to, be back in connection with your team, be able to check your email, see what's going on? And she said, no, I'm not going to turn my phone on until I get home. This has been incredible.
That's huge, man.
Huge. So a lot of times it's just doing it. And we take our kids camping and backpacking, and we go to places without service, and we do that for leaders too. And I don't want to say like that's one of the most valuable things we offer, because I think it shortchanges all our curriculum and our amazing guides and everything else. But honestly, just a forcing function to put down your phone for 48 hours is a lot of value. And people, it's hard to do that. We feel like we have all these things to do. And I tell this story too. I went on leave the first time as a Divo, as a naval officer, and I was all sweating. I was like, geez, are they going to know what to do without me there? And I got back and I said, Chief, like, how is everything? And my chief was like, oh, you were gone last week? I was like, oh.
Yeah. Sounds like a good chief, dude.
Yeah, exactly.
Sounds like a good chief.
Yeah.
So,
well, we can even do that on a micro level, right? Like, I mean, we can do that on a daily basis, like 5 to 7 p.m. We're going to all put our phones away, right? And we're going to have family dinners together, no phones, no electronics. We're going to talk. We're going to hang out as a family, right? So you can do that on such a micro level and teach our families that.
Yeah.
Without having to go on a Joshua Tree Mountain rock climbing, right?
And I push that a lot. Obviously I want people to come out on our adventures and do something more, and just go for a hike, go for a 15-minute hike at lunch. Even if you're downtown, go outside and hike, through the streets, go, look at trees with your kids, go jump in this fall. I'm looking out the window here. The maple trees are dropping all their leaves. Go rake those up in a pile and jump in them. You'll feel silly, but you will love it. And it takes half an hour.
Dude, I you talk about accountability. Part of the mastermind is every month we assign new accountability partners, dual purpose, one to get guys that don't know each other very plugged in, but we're in a family part of our curriculum, and it's on my calendar 4 to 6 every single day. It says kid time, phone down. And nice. But I don't honor it. So my accountability, my accountability partner this month, I told him about it, and he's like, so now he sends me a text every day at 3:50 my time. Is like, phone down, dude. And I'm like, all right, so it's good. But even that, it's good for us, right? It's good for us. But sometimes we don't think strategically about our family. It's good for our kids to see. Like so I'm going to make a show of it this week. They're home. I'll be like, okay, guys, I'm putting my phone away. This is our time. And I'm going to just make a show of it so that they know that I take it seriously, that this means a lot to me. And 4 to 6 every day, that is ingrained in all of our heads, that this is time for us to, very specifically no phone time. Yeah. And I think, even this outdoor thing, the thing I can't get away from is, man, if we can collectively get to a point that we highlight that being outside is truly beneficial for our bottom line as business leaders and as leaders. And for bottom line, what is bottom line? Money, health, savings, fitness, all these things, then I think people would be more prone to do it, right? If we finally can make a correlation between being together, being outside, and that's just a normal part of a culture, it would just be an amazing thing for our businesses. And so I applaud you for you're planting those seeds, you're showing through experience, and the fact that, it's huge when people are addicted to these things. It's huge to come back from a 48 hours. It's 2 days to come back from something for that minimum amount of time and be changed is huge, dude. I love it.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about time. I just read Happier Hour by Dr. Cassie Holmes. If you haven't read it, really recommend it. And she talks about happiness and a function of time, and a couple of key points. If you have less than 2 hours of discretionary time or more than 5, you're less happy. So people are always like, I just wish I had like a lot more free time. Like, not really. It's not important to have more than 5 hours, as long as you have 2 and you're using them intentionally. And the cell phone is the number one, just attention suck. Like, we just look at the cell phone. And then what I really love is this kind of mathematical formula of, think about walks with your kids, and how many have you done and how many are left. I'm thinking about, I'm at my folks' place right now, how many dinners with my parents do I have left, and how tempted am I to check my email while I'm sitting here having dinner with them? Well, if you do the math, I've done 85%, 90% of the dinners that I'm going to have with my family, my mom and my dad, before they pass away and they're not there anymore. And when you start like doing that math, you're like, put the phone down, dinners with family, with kids, whatever it is, walking your dog, all of a sudden that becomes like a cherished moment, instead of having to go walk the dog or having to sit down through dinner or having to put the phone down. So just
when the kids,
radical.
it's not as morbid as them, ideally it's not as morbid as them passing, but it's
right.
They're going to be gone, dude.
Yeah.
They're going to go, and they're going to live their life just like we did. And so that 18 years is like 99% of all the time, intensive time that you get with your kids, man. It's crazy. And so I love how you frame that, because if we think more in those terms, you recognize there's a bit of a desire and a need and almost a hey man, the clock's ticking, so let's make this meaningful. I love that, man. It's great.
Yeah. And factor in, sports practices, and,
Right.
They're going to get boyfriends and girlfriends, and they're going to be like,
No,
yeah,
not my
mom
kids.
and dad.
Your kids are going to get boyfriends and girlfriends. My kids are not.
Oh my gosh. My 4-year-old, we're talking about bad guys and good guys, and how she's going to bring a guy home eventually. And she's like, if I bring a bad guy home, will you take care of him? And my wife, she's a Marine for 10 years. And me, we're like, yeah, we will.
Yeah, we'll take care of him.
Whether you think he's a bad guy or not, sweetie.
Shotgun waiting at the door.
Yeah.
Dude, this has been awesome, man. This has been a fun conversation. I'm sure we could go for another hour. If you could plug your stuff, where can people find out more about you? Where can they learn about Cairn Leadership? And how can they get connected with you?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Our website's always a great resource, cairnleadership.com, CAIRN leadership. Those are the stacks of stones, by the way,
Yep.
that you see on the trail. It's foggy, or you're on a climber's trail, you don't know where to go, and you're like, oh, there's that stack of stones. I know where to go now. So cairnleadership.com, night@cairnleadership.com is my email. Feel free to reach out that way. And LinkedIn, I haven't actually searched. I always say this, I'm probably the only Knight Campbell on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Maybe there's another one. I should probably make that search, but look me up, connect. We talked about LinkedIn earlier. It is a spark for great and deep relationships if you look. So
awesome, man. We'll put those links in the show notes. Dude, this has been a fun conversation. Dave, you got anything else?
No, man. Thank you, Knight, for your time. I really appreciate your leadership and action. And dude, you're changing lives, man. I love you. You're pursuing your passion. You tied the outdoors and leadership together, and you're seeing just the tip of the iceberg of change in people's lives. I think there's, the part that you don't see is all the aftermath and the after impacts that you're making. So, man, keep it up, dude. It's awesome. I love it. Love it.
Hey, same to you all. We're thinking the same lines here, and you're getting people outside and connecting people in meaningful ways. So appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, dude. Guys and gals, hey, reach out tonight. Check out cairnleadership.com. Connect with him on LinkedIn. Hey, if this was meaningful to you, share it. Tell somebody about this podcast episode. Tell somebody about Cairn Leadership, and get outside, get together, hang out a little bit more, put the phones away. And let's become better all together. But most important, let's go fill the storehouse.
Yeah. Thanks, Knight. Thanks, friends. Make it a great day. Get outside. See ya. What up, my dude? Hey, man, I absolutely loved this episode with Knight. So much value add, ton of great actionable steps to take. And I think we need to go outside and have a meeting.
Let's go climb a mountain like right now.
Right now.
Like this instant. We're done recording. We're going to go for a hike. Hey man, this is the stuff that we're talking about. This is the stuff that we're promoting. We got to get outside, got to be together in person, hanging out, getting in nature. This is the stuff we're focused on, just a small piece of it within the Storehouse Mastermind. And we need this right now in our lives, right? And other men I know need this in our lives. And we're starting another group. We're starting another house. House 2 opens up November 1st. If you're interested in being a part of this, go to storehouse310.com/mastermind. There's a big join now button right at the top. Hit that, apply. And our next retreat is going to be this winter. And we're going to go do the exact same stuff that we talked about on this podcast. So do it, be a leader, get outside, come hang with us. We're kind of cool. I'm really cool. David's not, but hey.
And everybody that was interested just became not interested. So thanks, Stu. Join us. Let's get it.
See you.
Thanks for listening to Filling the Storehouse. If you enjoyed our show, please subscribe and share it with someone you love. And if you really felt inspired, leave a 5-star review so we could continue to grow and help other Christian entrepreneurs fill their storehouse. If you're interested in creating financial freedom through real estate investing, be sure to check out our website at storehouse310turnkey.com. We'd love to serve you through our platform of building the kingdom. Just click on the contact link and we'll reply to you as soon as we can. Again, thanks so much for listening. Now go fill your storehouse and make it a great day.